The world was once shared with giants. Woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats were not just animals, they were living forces that shaped the human mind itself. This is the lost language of Megafauna, a silent dialogue between our ancestors and the most colossal beasts to ever walk the earth. By the end of this journey, you will understand how these creatures forged the very archetypes of our myths and the foundations of our fears. We will uncover how a chance encounter with a mastodon could spark a cognitive revolution, and why the ghost of a giant cave bear still lingers in our dreams. What part of your own imagination was built by a creature you have never seen? The air itself was different then, thick with the scent of ice and untamed grass. This was the Pleistocene epoch, a world locked in a cycle of advancing and retreating glaciers, a stage set for giants across continents. An astonishing menagerie of massive animals roamed. We call them megafauna, a term for the large or giant animals, typically those weighing over 100 pounds, that defined these ancient landscapes. But these were not simply bigger elephants or larger deer. The woolly mammoth was a walking fortress, draped in shaggy hair and wielding immense curved tusks. The saber-toothed cat possessed fangs like daggers, a precision tool for a very specific and brutal form of hunting. The giant Irish elk carried antlers so wide they seemed to hold up the sky, a display of grandeur we can scarcely comprehend today. Each of these creatures was a unique species, perfectly engineered by evolution for its environment, from the frozen steppes of Eurasia to the vast forests of North America. Their sheer physical presence was a dominant feature of the world. The ground would have trembled under their footsteps, their silhouettes would have darkened the horizon. For the small, scattered bands of early humans, these giants were not abstract concepts or distant rumors. They were an ever-present reality, a constant and formidable part of daily life. To understand the silent language they spoke to our ancestors, we must first grasp their overwhelming physical truth. We must picture a human standing alone on a vast plain, looking up at a creature that defied scale. What thoughts, what primal calculations would flash through a mind confronted by such living, breathing power for the very first time? That first encounter would have been a moment of pure cognitive rupture. A human mind, accustomed to tracking deer and gathering berries, is suddenly confronted by a living mountain. The mastodon does not just stand there, it dominates the very air, its deep rumbles vibrating in your chest. Primal fear would have been the first and most vital response, a lightning-fast surge of adrenaline screaming a single command, run or hide. But intertwined with that terror was something else, a profound and humbling awe. Here was a power so immense it defied all previous understanding of what an animal could be. The brain's pattern recognition systems, so adept at identifying a wolf in the bushes or a snake in the grass, would have short-circuited. This creature was a new category of being entirely. This overwhelming fusion of fear and wonder, this megafaunal shock, was not a fleeting emotion. It was a formative event, a psychological scar, and a spark of inspiration carved into the collective human psyche. Survival depended on processing this encounter, on filing it away not just as a threat but as a puzzle. How do you avoid this creature? Could you possibly hunt it? What does it eat? Where does it sleep? The sheer scale of the problem demanded a new scale of thinking. It forced the development of complex, multi-step strategies, of coordinated group action, of patient observation over days and weeks. This was a cognitive gymnasium, and the weights were unimaginably heavy. The emotional residue of these encounters never truly faded. That potent mixture of terror and reverence became the bedrock of our relationship with the natural world's greatest powers. It was the first step toward a dialogue, a silent language where the giant was both a physical fact and a symbol waiting to be born. These giants were more than just biological facts. They were psychological forces, and their most profound gift to us may have been the archetypes themselves. Our minds are built to recognize patterns, to compress complex ideas into powerful, singular images. What better template for ultimate power than a short-faced bear, a creature that stood tall enough to look a modern grizzly in the eye while still on all fours? It was not merely a bear, it was the embodiment of an unstoppable force, a living definition of the word monster. The giant cave lion with fangs that could pierce the skull of a bison was not just a hunter. It became the very concept of a lethal, stalking danger. These creatures were not symbols because we decided to make them so. They were symbols because their physical reality was so overwhelming it forced its way into the deepest structures of our thought. Consider the idea of a guardian. A woolly mammoth moving in a protective circle around its young presented a wall of tusks and fury. That image, witnessed by our ancestors, is a ready-made blueprint for a protector spirit, a being of immense strength that defends what is sacred. Or think of the provider. A single successful hunt on a mastodon could feed a band for months. The creature's immense body, in death, meant life for the entire community. It became a walking abundance, a symbol of sustenance and survival granted by the wilderness itself. This process of archetype formation was a cognitive shortcut of immense power. Instead of having to explain the abstract idea of an unstoppable threat, you could simply evoke the memory of the short-faced bear. Instead of describing the complex concept of a protective spirit, you could paint the image of the mammoth mother. These giant beasts provided a shared library of mental images, a common vocabulary of awe and terror that every member of the tribe understood instinctively. This was the crucial bridge from basic survival to true symbolic thought. It allowed early humans to package the world's most powerful forces into memorable, transferable concepts. The stage was now set. The actors, these colossal archetypes, were waiting in the wings of the human mind, ready for their entrance into the very first stories ever told. This cognitive leap was a quiet revolution inside the human mind. A mammoth was no longer just a creature to be feared or hunted. It began to transform into something far more powerful, an idea. Its sheer bulk and resilience against the bitter cold started to mean more than just physical traits. They became a living metaphor for strength and endurance. Its thick, shaggy coat was not merely fur, it was the very embodiment of winter's harshness. This was the birth of symbolic meaning, the profound ability to see the world in two layers at once, the literal and the abstract. The animal itself was one reality, a biological fact, but the concepts it represented became another, a mental reality shared by the group. This was a fundamental rewiring of human thought. The capacity to hold the idea of the mammoth separate from its physical presence was nothing short of revolutionary. You could now discuss the mammoth spirit of endurance without one being in sight. You could plan for the harshness of winter by evoking its image. This abstract thinking enabled complex communication and planning on a scale never before possible. It allowed for cultural memory, where the lessons learned from one generation about these giants could be passed down to the next as powerful stories, not just practical instructions. The mammoth had become a signifier, a key word in humanity's first internal lexicon. This new symbolic language, triggered by such potent and unforgettable stimuli, was arguably a key driver in the evolution of advanced human consciousness. The human mind had learned to use the giants of the world as building blocks for its own inner world of meaning. And with that new inner world built, humanity felt a deep, irresistible urge to bring it out into the open, to make the invisible world of symbols visible for the very first time. Deep within the earth, far from the sun and wind, the silent dialogue found its voice. The caves of Lascaux and Chauvet are not just geological formations, they are cathedrals of memory. Here, on walls of cold stone, the giants were resurrected in vibrant ochre and charcoal. A mighty aurochs charges forever in the flickering torchlight. A woolly mammoth, its shape unmistakable, seems to breathe from the rock itself. This was not doodling or simple decoration. This was humanity's first great act of externalizing its inner world. The symbolic archetypes, born from fear and awe on the sunlit plains, were now being projected onto the canvas of the earth. The act of painting itself was a ritual. Mixing the pigments, choosing the perfect curve of the wall to suggest a massive shoulder, tracing the line of a giant horn, this was a deliberate and sacred process. It was an attempt to capture not just the physical form of the animal, but its very essence, its spirit, and its power. By painting the mammoth, the artist was engaging in a profound dialogue with the concept of the mammoth. They were reaching out to the force it represented. Was this an attempt to exert a form of control, to pin the terrifying, magnificent idea of the beast to the wall, making its spirit knowable and somehow manageable? Or was it an act of deep respect, a form of supplication to the provider of life, a prayer for a successful hunt painted in the hope that the real creature would offer itself? The placement of these images holds clues. Certain animals appear in deep, difficult-to-reach chambers, suggesting their depiction was a special, perhaps even dangerous, undertaking reserved for the most powerful symbols. Other walls are layered with generations of paintings, a palimpsest of belief where one tribe's vision of the bison was painted over another's, building a collective mythology. This artistic explosion was the megafauna's final and most enduring gift to the human mind. It provided the ultimate muse, a subject so compelling and rich with meaning that it demanded expression. The internal language of symbols had found its first alphabet, but what happened when these living archetypes began to vanish from the earth? How did their sudden, thundering silence reshape the stories they had inspired? The grammar of this lost language is written in the recurring symbols on the cave walls. Look closely at a painted bison. Its power is not rendered in a general way. The artist lavished attention on two specific features: the massive hump of muscle on its shoulders and the sweeping curve of its horns. Why this focus? The hump was a reservoir of strength, a biological fact that could be transformed into a powerful symbol of stored energy, of endurance through the lean months. It was a walking promise of seasonal plenty. The horns were not just weapons, they were a perfect, natural representation of a crescent, a shape that could encompass the moon, the cycle of life and death, or the very arc of the horizon itself. These were not arbitrary artistic choices, they were deliberate codifications of meaning. The placement of the images within the caves themselves speaks volumes. The cave bear, a creature of immense solitary power, is often depicted in the most remote and inaccessible chambers, places where the act of painting itself was a perilous journey. This was not a gallery for public display. This placement suggests a link to the most profound spiritual realms, perhaps a site for vision quests or initiation rites where an individual would confront the archetype of raw, untamed power in the Earth's deepest womb. The most compelling evidence for a shared symbolic vocabulary comes from the consistency of these depictions across vast distances. From the caves of Europe to rock shelters in Asia, the same animals are rendered with the same emphasized features. A mammoth is always a mammoth, its high domed head and great tusks unmistakable. This consistency across thousands of miles and generations implies that these images were more than just local folk tales. They were elements of a sophisticated visual language, a system with its own grammar and syntax. The bison was a noun, its hump an adjective describing its essential nature, and its placement in a specific chamber a verb describing its sacred action. This language was used to convey the most complex ideas a human mind could grapple with, ideas about life, death, the spirit world, and humanity's precarious but profound place within it all. We can see the words on the wall, but the meaning whispers just beyond our grasp, a fluent conversation from which we are forever separated by a chasm of silence. The kill was not the end of the conversation, it was the most solemn part of it. When a human hunting party faced a mammoth, they were engaging in far more than a tactical operation. They were initiating a sacred dialogue with a powerful spirit. Before the first spear was ever thrown, rituals were performed. Hunters might fast or chant, entering a state of mind that recognized the gravity of what was to come. They were not just preparing to take a life, they were preparing to ask a colossal force for the ultimate gift. The hunt itself was a dangerous and intimate dance, a direct physical negotiation with the beast's power. Every coordinated movement, every thrown weapon, was a sentence spoken in this high-stakes language. Success was not seen as a simple triumph of human cleverness. It was viewed as the animal's conscious decision to offer itself, a willing participant in a cycle that sustained the entire community. This belief transformed the act of killing from one of violence into one of profound communication. After the mammoth fell, the rituals continued with even greater intensity. Elaborate ceremonies of thanks were performed directly over the body. Specific parts of the animal, like the skull or the heart, might be treated with special reverence and arranged in a particular way. The bones were often buried with care, not simply discarded. These actions were a form of apology and a promise. They were a plea to the animal spirit, do not be angry, do not abandon us. Please allow your kin to return so that this cycle may continue. This spiritual relationship reveals a deep understanding of interdependence. The mammoth was not a mere resource to be consumed. It was a teacher whose behavior had to be studied with intense focus. It was a partner in a sacred contract that governed survival. And most importantly, it was a spiritual entity of immense power, a being whose favor meant life and whose wrath could mean starvation. This reverence for the giant beast laid the very foundation for how humanity would come to understand the divine. The most powerful forces in the world were no longer just physical threats, they were conscious partners in a cosmic dialogue. And when their thundering footsteps finally fell silent, that dialogue did not end. It simply had to find new voices. When the living giants vanished, their echoes refused to fade. Across the ancient world, the bones of these colossal creatures literally stuck out of the ground, puzzling and terrifying the people who found them. A Greek shepherd stumbling upon the skull of a dwarf elephant would have seen a single, giant hole in the center of the forehead, the space where the trunk once attached. With no concept of extinct proboscideans, the mind did what it does best. It filled the gap with a known terror. That skull became the head of a cyclops, a monstrous one-eyed giant. This was not a deliberate act of fiction, it was an act of interpretation. The physical evidence was right there. The massive bones did not lie, but the story woven around them was a new kind of truth, a myth born from a fossil. The same process unfolded in the deserts of Persia and Arabia, where travelers would find the enormous skeletons of long-necked dinosaurs. To a culture that relied on birds for transport and hunting, what else could such a skeleton belong to but a bird of impossible scale? Thus, the legend of the rock was born, a creature so vast it could carry off an elephant. These stories were the desperate, creative attempts of the human mind to explain the unexplainable, to give a name and a form to the tangible ghosts of a lost world. The giants had left their bones as a final, cryptic message, and humanity was determined to read it. The language of Megafauna was being translated into the foundational epics of civilization. The most enduring monster of all, the dragon, is perhaps the ultimate expression of this process. It is a composite creature, a walking memory of multiple megafaunal threats merged into one perfect, terrifying archetype. Its serpentine body might recall the sheer size of a giant python or the unearthed backbone of a massive sauropod. Its sharp claws and predatory stance echo the saber-toothed cat. Its supposed ability to smash through trees and its immense strength are pure megafauna, a direct memory of what it felt like to stand before a charging mammoth. The dragon is not one forgotten beast, but all of them combined into a single, symbolic vessel for humanity's primal fear of the natural world's most overwhelming power. These myths served a crucial purpose. They were cautionary tales warning children away from deep caves where cave bear spirits might still dwell. They were explanations for violent storms or earthquakes, events so powerful they must be the work of a slumbering giant. Most importantly, they became the bedrock of cultural identity, the shared stories that bound a people together. The heroes who slew these monsters were not just killing animals, they were conquering chaos itself, establishing human order against the fading memory of a world ruled by beasts. The silent dialogue had found a new medium, moving from the sacred cave wall to the campfire story, ensuring that the ghost of the giant would walk the earth for millennia to come. Then the world fell silent. The ground no longer trembled with the approach of giants. The deep, resonant calls of the mammoth herds faded from the air, leaving only the wind. This was not a gradual change. Across continents over a span of a few thousand years, the megafauna vanished, a wave of extinctions driven by a shifting climate and the expanding reach of humanity. The ecological impact was catastrophic, but the psychological impact was a kind of amputation. The living archetypes, the very foundation of humanity's symbolic language, were gone. How do you mourn a symbol? The human psyche, so recently structured around the presence of these colossal beings, was plunged into a state of profound disorientation. The world felt smaller, less charged with meaning, and infinitely quieter. The constant, humbling dialogue with power had ended, leaving behind an echoing void. This was a collective loss, a nostalgia for a world that was grander and more terrifying than the one that remained. The stories and paintings now felt different, like memories of a conversation with someone who would never speak again. Humanity was left alone in a landscape that had lost its most potent teachers, forced to carry the entire weight of its symbolic world internally. This was a pivotal moment in our history, a rupture that demanded a new kind of imagination. Without the living beast to anchor the symbol itself had to become more fluid, more abstract, and ultimately more powerful. The ghost of the giant was now free to become a god. This new quiet in the world was unsettling. With the giants gone, humanity faced a profound emptiness, a landscape stripped of its most formidable teachers and partners. Our ancestors did not simply mourn this loss, they adapted in the most pragmatic way imaginable. They turned their attention from the untamable to the manageable, forging new alliances with wolves, goats, and cattle. This was the Domestication Shift, a fundamental rewriting of the human-animal contract. The sacred dialogue of awe and fear was replaced by a new language of mutual benefit and direct control. We were no longer pleading with powerful spirits for the gift of their lives. We were now making deals with smaller creatures, offering protection and food in exchange for milk, labor, and loyalty. The archetype of the wild other, the mammoth as a force of nature to be revered, began its slow retreat. In its place rose the archetype of the companion, the dog by the fire, and the archetype of the resource, the cow in the pen. This was not just an economic revolution, it was a profound psychological shift. The human mind, once shaped by the necessity of negotiating with overwhelming power, was now learning to exert its own will over the living world. The relationship became managerial. We bred animals for specific traits, we controlled their movements, we decided when they would eat and when they would die. This new dynamic reflected a growing sense of human mastery over the environment, a theme that would come to define the next 10,000 years of our history. The ghost of the giant had not vanished, of course. It still whispered in our oldest stories, but our daily reality was now filled with a different kind of animal presence, one that looked to us for guidance. This shift in our external relationships signaled an even deeper change within our own consciousness. We had begun to see ourselves not as participants in a world of powerful spirits, but as the architects of our own destiny. And as we built our first permanent homes and tended our first flocks, we started to construct a new kind of giant, one made not of flesh and bone, but of stone and belief. Our modern obsessions are not merely entertainment, they are ancient memories. A child's instinctive awe at the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus rex is not learned, it is remembered. The visceral chill that runs down your spine when you see a great white shark on screen is a primal alarm bell, a direct inheritance from ancestors for whom a massive predator was an immediate and daily threat. These reactions are psychological fossils, the deep-seated remnants of the megafaunal dialogue. We call this innate fascination with large, powerful creatures biophilia, a deep emotional connection to life and lifelike processes. But our specific draw to the giant and the monstrous is a specialized form of this, a hardwired echo from a time when understanding such beings was a matter of survival. Our culture continually resurrects these archetypes because our minds are primed to receive them. The colossal scale of Godzilla, the tragic power of King Kong, these are not random inventions. They are modern vessels for our oldest symbols. They allow us to safely experience that potent mixture of terror and awe that our ancestors felt on the open plain, staring up at a living mountain. We flock to films and devour books featuring giants because, on a profound level, we are fluent in a language they speak. We understand the unspoken grammar of their power, their danger, and their strange, humbling grandeur. This is why a simple image of a massive beast can stir such powerful and immediate emotions within us, a feeling that transcends logic and taps directly into the deepest layers of our shared psyche. The ghost of the giant never left, it simply found a new home in our collective imagination. The need to bring down a walking mountain forged the human mind as much as it forged our first weapons. Confronting a creature like a woolly mammoth with nothing but a sharpened rock was a death wish. The challenge itself became an engine for innovation, pushing our ancestors to become the ultimate toolmakers. This was not about creating a simple knife for cutting meat. It was about engineering a system for survival against impossible odds. The first step was rethinking stone. A basic hand axe was useless against thick hide and a ton of muscle. So early humans began crafting specialized tools, a true toolkit for giants. They developed sharp bifacial points, carefully flaked on both sides to create a strong, penetrating tip designed to sink deep. They made scrapers with specific curves to efficiently remove every last piece of fat from a massive hide, and heavy choppers to break apart immense bones for their nutritious marrow. Each tool was a piece of a larger puzzle, a physical answer to a question posed by the megafauna's sheer scale. but a perfect point is worthless if you cannot deliver it with enough force to matter. Throwing a spear by hand at a mammoth would be like throwing a toothpick at a tank. The solution was a leap of applied physics, the invention of the atlatl, or spear thrower. This simple lever effectively extended the length of the hunter's arm, multiplying the force and velocity of the throw. With an atlatl, a spear could be launched with the power to pierce deep into a mammoth's vital organs from a safer distance. Mastering this weapon required more than strength. It demanded an intuitive understanding of trajectory, leverage, and timing, a form of nonverbal reasoning that exercised the brain in profoundly new ways. The final and most complex tool was not made of stone or wood, but of people. A successful hunt was a masterpiece of social coordination. It required a shared plan, communicated through gestures and perhaps early language that unfolded over days. Scouts had to track the herd and identify a vulnerable individual. Others would prepare an ambush site, perhaps driving the animal toward a swamp or a natural trap. During the attack, each person had a role to play, a dangerous dance of distraction, flanking, and the final, decisive strike. This level of cooperation demanded foresight, trust, and a shared mental model of a future event that did not yet exist. The cognitive loop was complete. The mind envisioned a better spear, the hands crafted it, and the social group used it in a coordinated act of supreme intelligence. The language of toolmaking and the language of the hunt were one and the same, a grammar of problem-solving written in stone, strategy, and shared purpose. This constant cognitive workout, forced upon us by giants, didn't just give us better tools, it fundamentally upgraded the hardware of the human mind itself. A woolly rhinoceros was a walking fortress of muscle and horn. No single person, no matter how brave or strong, could ever hope to bring one down. This simple, brutal fact of life forced our ancestors to become something more than just a collection of individuals. It forced them to become a society. The hunt for giant prey was the ultimate social catalyst, a crucible that forged the very bonds of community. Every stage of the hunt demanded seamless cooperation. Scouts had to track the beast for days, reading the landscape for signs and communicating their findings back to the group. This required a shared mental map and a common vocabulary, pushing the limits of early language. Someone had to emerge as a leader, not through brute force but through strategic insight, able to formulate a plan and direct the actions of others. This established the first clear roles of authority and expertise within the group. During the ambush itself, every person had a part to play. Some would drive the animal forward with noise and fire, while others, the strongest and most skilled, would take up positions for the dangerous final assault. This was a dance of coordinated movement and split-second timing, a performance where a single misstep could mean death. The shared risk created an unbreakable bond of trust. You were literally placing your life in the hands of your companions. Success was a collective triumph that echoed for weeks. A single woolly rhino could feed the entire band, and the processing of the carcass was another communal event. Everyone had a task, from skinning the immense hide to breaking the heavy bones. This was not just about dividing the spoils, it was a reaffirmation of the group's interdependence. The feast that followed was more than a meal, it was a celebration of shared identity. Stories of the hunt would be told and retold, solidifying the event into the tribe's mythology, honoring the bravery of the hunters and the spirit of the beast. This collaborative dynamic, repeated over generations, hardwired a profound lesson into the human psyche. We are stronger together. The pursuit of a common, formidable goal teaches us how to trust, how to lead, how to follow, and how to communicate. The ghost of the woolly rhinoceros, in demanding our cooperation, helped teach us how to be human. Australia holds a living library of this ancient dialogue. For Aboriginal peoples, the Dreamtime is not a distant past but a continuous reality, a spiritual landscape where the creation ancestors, many of them giant beasts, still walk and shape the world. These are not vague legends. They are precise, detailed accounts of the land and its inhabitants, and remarkably, they describe creatures science only recently identified from fossils. The Diprotodon, a wombat the size of a rhinoceros, appears in these stories not as a dusty skeleton, but as a powerful being with its own name and role in the cosmology. The terrifying Megalania, a monitor lizard that could have looked a full-grown human in the eye, is remembered as a monstrous creator spirit. This oral tradition is a direct transmission, an unbroken chain of memory stretching back more than 40,000 years. It is the lost language of Megafauna still being spoken. The stories function as intricate ecological and moral maps. A dreaming track might describe the path a giant kangaroo ancestor took, and along that path, every waterhole, every distinctive rock formation, and every type of plant has a meaning and a story connected to that being. This encoded knowledge ensured the survival of the people, telling them where to find water in a drought or which areas were spiritually significant. The memory of the giant beast was not just a tale of terror, it was a practical guide to living in a harsh land, a lesson from a time when humanity shared the continent with living archetypes. This continuity is staggering. It means that for over 1,000 generations, parents have looked at their children and spoken of the Diprotodon, keeping its essence alive through story and ceremony long after its physical form vanished from the earth. This is not fossilized history. It is a vibrant, spiritual relationship with the land that actively includes these long-vanished giants. It proves that the symbolic language born from Megafauna was not a fleeting phase in human development, but a robust and durable system of knowledge capable of spanning millennia with breathtaking accuracy. In the whispering songs of the Dreamtime, we can almost hear the echo of a mammoth's call. The shaman's journey was the ultimate internalization of this dialogue. In the flickering firelight of a deep trance, the human mind did not just remember the giant, it summoned its very essence. Across countless shamanic traditions, the most powerful spirit guides were not small, quick animals, but the monumental beings of the ancient world. A seeker yearning for unshakable strength would call upon the spirit of the giant cave bear, inviting its ferocious power into their soul. Someone facing a long, grueling trial might seek a vision of the woolly mammoth, drawing on its profound stamina to endure. This was not mere superstition. It was a sophisticated psychological technology, a way to access the archetypal forces that these creatures represented. The Megafauna had become personal and clan totems, living symbols woven into the very fabric of identity. To be the people of the great bison was to inherit its traits of abundance and resilience. This relationship granted a tangible connection to the raw power of the natural world, a power that could be consulted, respected, and channeled. The shaman, in their altered state, was not escaping reality. They were plunging into its deepest layer, actively communicating with the archetypes that our ancestors had first encountered on the physical plane. This practice was the conversation turned inward, where once the entire tribe witnessed the mammoth's might, now a single individual could journey to meet its spirit in the dreamscape. This internalization was crucial. It kept the symbolic language vibrant and personally relevant long after the last mammoth had turned to bone and dust. The giants were no longer just out there in the landscape. They had taken up residence within the landscape of the human soul, becoming permanent residents of our inner world, their echoes guiding our steps long into the future. That shamanic whisper echoes in our most fundamental tool, language itself. Words can be fossils, preserving the shape of long-vanished realities within their syllables. Linguists studying the deep roots of ancient languages have uncovered a tantalizing possibility. Certain widespread words for massive animals, like those for elephant or rhinoceros, might be far older than the creatures we associate them with today. They could be linguistic relics, terms that originally named the woolly mammoth and the woolly rhinoceros. A word that now means elephant in one language might have been used by a people who never saw an African elephant, but who lived in the shadow of the mammoth for thousands of years. When the mammoth vanished, the powerful, necessary word for it did not simply disappear. Instead, it was transferred. It was the closest existing label for the next most similar colossal creature encountered by migrating peoples. The concept of the giant beast was so culturally vital that the language refused to let it go. The word itself became a vessel, carrying the memory of the original animal forward through time. This is more than just a change in definition. It is a form of cultural inheritance. The emotional weight of the word, the awe and fear it originally evoked when pointing at a living mammoth, would have clung to it, coloring how later generations perceived the new animal. The name carried a ghost, ensuring that the essence of the Ice Age giant subtly shaped the human understanding of its tropical cousin. We see this process not in grand epics, but in the quiet, foundational layer of vocabulary. It suggests that the experience of Megafauna was not a fleeting moment, but a profound and lasting imprint. The very structure of how we name the world's great creatures was molded by our time among giants. This linguistic fossil record is fragile and open to debate, yet its implication is profound. Our speech is haunted by the beasts we lost. Our very brain structure may be a monument to these giants. Modern neuroscience reveals that moments of profound awe, the feeling we get when confronted with something vast that transcends our current understanding, physically change the brain. It promotes neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Standing before a woolly mammoth would have been the ultimate awe-generating event. The sheer scale, the power, the otherworldly presence, it all combined into a sensory and emotional tsunami. This was not a passive observation, it was an intense neurological workout. The amygdala, our ancient threat detection center, would have flared with primal fear. Simultaneously, the regions responsible for visual processing and pattern recognition would have been overwhelmed, scrambling to categorize this new, impossible sight. And the prefrontal cortex, the seat of higher reasoning, would have been forced into overdrive, trying to make sense of it all and plan a response. This repeated firing of specific neural circuits, this constant state of awe and terror, would have physically strengthened those pathways. It was like a cognitive gym where the weights were living mountains. This awe-based wiring did more than just sharpen our survival instincts. It may have fundamentally predisposed the human mind toward a specific way of seeing the world. The brain, having been stretched by these encounters with vast, incomprehensible power, began seeking patterns and meanings that extended beyond the immediate physical threat. That feeling of being a small part of something immense, a feeling generated every time a giant passed by, is the very foundation of spiritual thought. It is the origin of the question, what force could create such a being? What is my place in a world that contains such wonders? The neural pathways forged in awe became the conduits for our first prayers, our first symbols, and our deep-seated need to find a story large enough to explain a universe populated by giants. These ancient conversations were not ours alone. Across Europe and Asia, our Neanderthal cousins lived in a world of giants for hundreds of thousands of years before our own species ever arrived. Their archaeological record tells a complex story of survival. They were masterful hunters of mammoths and woolly rhinos, creatures that would have demanded immense courage and coordination to bring down. They crafted sophisticated stone spear points, strong enough to penetrate thick hide, and evidence from kill sites shows they were capable of ambushing and dispatching these colossal animals. Their physical survival was deeply intertwined with megafauna. But was that the entirety of their relationship? The question that truly fascinates is whether they, too, spoke the silent language of symbolism. Did a Neanderthal look at a mammoth and see only meat and hide, or did they also see a spirit, a symbol of power, a being worthy of reverence? The evidence is subtle and deeply debated. We find piles of mammoth bones arranged in what appear to be deliberate patterns at some Neanderthal sites. In one cave, a circle of stalagmites was built with a fragment of a bear skull placed carefully in the center. These are not the vibrant, expressive cave paintings of Lascaux, but they are whispers of something more than mere utility. They hint at a possible ritual life, a nascent attempt to impose order or meaning on the raw power of the natural world. Perhaps their symbolic language was simply different from ours, expressed in ephemeral materials like wood, gesture, and song that left no trace in the archaeological record. Or perhaps the cognitive leap to externalize these archetypes in enduring art was a unique spark in our own lineage. Comparing our records forces us to ask a profound question about our own consciousness. If Neanderthals, with their large brains and complex societies, had a more utilitarian relationship with these beasts, then what was the special ingredient in the human mind that transformed the mammoth from a meal into a muse? This exploration does more than shed light on our extinct cousins. It helps us isolate the very essence of what it means to be human by showing us what we might have uniquely built with the same raw materials of a world filled with giants. The earth itself remembered the giants long after they were gone. Deep trails carved not by rivers but by the relentless, heavy tread of mammoth herds snaked across the continents. These were not mere paths but permanent grooves in the planet's skin, so deep that early humans could walk within them, their own steps dwarfed by the impressions left behind. These trails were the megafauna's highways, and they dictated the flow of life itself. Humans learned to follow these routes not out of imitation but out of necessity. They led to water, to seasonal grazing grounds, and to the most reliable hunting spots, a massive, muddy wallow where mammoths once bathed and coated themselves in cooling clay wood for generations after, remain a clearing where other animals gathered. The very composition of the forests and grasslands was a legacy of their feeding. By knocking over trees and stripping bark, mammoths acted as natural foresters, preventing woodlands from overrunning the plains and maintaining a mosaic of habitats that supported a vast array of smaller life. Early humans did not inherit a pristine wilderness. They inhabited a world actively engineered by giants, a world whose very shape whispered their names. A wide, open meadow was not just a meadow, it was a place where mammoths fed. A strangely curved valley might be remembered as the old rhino route. These environmental features were constant, tangible reminders, a physical script written into the hills and valleys. The landscape became a vast mnemonic device, a non-verbal part of the lost language. An elder pointing to a particular scar on a hillside was not just giving directions, they were recounting a story. They were saying, this is where the great ones passed, this is where they found water, this is where we must go. The land told a continuous story of abundance, migration, and raw geologic power. It was a map that everyone could read, a living memory of the giants that shaped not just the dirt underfoot, but the very thoughts of those who walked upon it. That deep, dormant part of our consciousness is suddenly awakened by the sight of a blue whale. Its heart alone is the size of a small car, a thrumming engine we can feel reverberating through the ocean floor. This is not a creature from a fantasy film. It is a living, breathing reality of our modern world, yet it evokes the very same awe our ancestors felt on the mammoth steppes. Our enduring fascination with giants, from the monsters of cinema to our reverence for the last great beasts on Earth, is not a new invention. It is the ancient megafaunal archetype roaring back to life. In a world we have largely built to our own scale, surrounded by cities and screens, these giants perform a crucial psychological function. They shatter our human-centric bubble. They force us to look up, or in the case of the whale, to look down into the abyss and remember that we are not the sole measure of all things. A blockbuster film about a colossal reptile stomping through a city taps directly into this primal circuitry. It allows us to safely experience that old, potent mixture of terror and wonder, to feel small again in a way that is strangely humbling and thrilling. This is not an escape from reality, but a reconnection with a deeper one. The ghost of the mammoth finds its voice in the haunting song of the humpback whale. It reminds us of a world that was once, and in a few precious places still is, ruled by a different, grander order. This symbolic need for humility is hardwired into us. We seek out these experiences with giants because on some fundamental level we miss them. We long for that feeling of being a part of something vast and untamable, a feeling that was a daily reality for thousands of generations. In the silent, immense presence of a whale, we are not the masters of the planet. We are once again the small, clever hominids on the plain, looking up at a living mountain and feeling a sense of wonder that puts all our human concerns into a proper, cosmic perspective. The silent disappearance of the mammoth left a void in the human soul, but it was a quiet catastrophe. Today, the tragedy is deafening. We are living through the second great wave of megafauna extinction, and this time the cause is not a mystery. Our ancestors, armed with stone-tipped spears, may have delivered the final blow to isolated populations of woolly rhinos and giant ground sloths. We, armed with industrial machinery and global markets, are systematically dismantling the remaining animal kingdoms. The last northern white rhinos are guarded around the clock, not from saber-toothed cats but from poachers. Elephant populations are crashing, their great tusks fueling a bloody trade. The great whales, those singing giants of the deep, still face the threats of ship strikes and a polluted ocean. This is not ancient history. It is the front-page news of our planet's unraveling. The ethical lesson from our deep past is unmistakable. We have been here before, and we know how the story ends. It ends with silence. It ends with the irreversible loss of a living archetype. When the last elephant falls, we are not just losing a species. We are severing our last tangible link to the mammoth. We are erasing a fundamental symbol of wisdom, memory, and strength from the visible world, confining it forever to the dusty pages of history. To allow a creature like the blue whale to vanish is to willfully extinguish a source of profound awe, a living reminder of the planet's capacity for grandeur. This is a cultural and psychological crime as much as a biological one. We are not just impoverishing the ecosystem, we are impoverishing the human imagination itself, robbing all future generations of the chance to stand humbled before a living giant. The ghost of the mammoth is not just a memory, it is a warning and it is a plea. It asks us to finally learn the lesson our ancestors learned too late, that these beings are not resources to be managed, but partners in a shared destiny. Protecting the last great beasts is an act of profound self-preservation, a commitment to keeping the world wondrous and whole. That symbolic void left behind was a cavernous space in the human spirit. The living definitions of wilderness and power were gone. We no longer had to look to the horizon to find a being that embodied the planet's untamed heart. That external reference point for the sublime, the thing that made us feel small in a world of immense, non-human forces, had vanished. So we began to build new symbols from the only material we had left, the contents of our own mind. The giant cave bear, a creature whose spirit was once sought in a dark cavern, slowly transformed into a god of the underworld. The great provider mammoth became a deity of abundance and harvest. But something crucial had changed. These new gods, while powerful, were increasingly shaped in our own image. They thought like us, they schemed like us, they felt human emotions like jealousy and pride. This was the great inward turn. The focus of awe shifted from the tangible, breathing giant moving across the landscape to the abstract, imagined giant residing in a celestial realm. Our spirituality became less about a dialogue with the external world and more about a negotiation with a reflection of ourselves. The terror of the natural world was internalized, becoming the concept of sin. The aspiration for power was internalized, becoming the quest for divine favor. This anthropomorphizing of the divine was a profound pivot. It placed humanity, or at least a magnified version of it, at the very center of the cosmic story. We were no longer humble participants in a world of beast gods. We were becoming the chosen children of human-like gods, a narrative that granted us a special, dominant status over creation. The ghost of the giant, once a constant companion, had been replaced by the echo of our own voice, and in that quiet, we began to tell ourselves a very different story about who we were. A modern artist sits before a blank canvas tasked with giving flesh to a ghost. This is the world of paleo art, a discipline where science and imagination collide to resurrect the lost. It begins not with a brushstroke but with a fossil. A single mammoth femur is a data point, a silent whisper of scale. Pair it with a tooth that reveals a diet of tough grasses, and you begin to understand its face. A piece of preserved skin from the permafrost tells the true color and texture of its shaggy coat. The paleo artist is a translator, working with paleontologists to decode these physical clues into a living, breathing creature. The goal is not fantasy, but a scientifically informed hypothesis rendered in color and form. Every muscle, every wrinkle around the eye, the way the light catches a tusk, these details are all arguments based on evidence. They are our best attempt to rebuild the mammoth from the fragments it left behind. This visual reconstruction is our first step toward relearning the lost language. We are trying to put a face to the name, a body to the archetype. When we stand before a breathtaking museum mural of a woolly rhinoceros, we are not just looking at a painting. We are participating in an act of shared memory. The image bridges the chasm of time, offering a visual echo of the living reality that once shaped our minds. It allows us for a fleeting moment to feel a shiver of that primal awe, to understand viscerally why our ancestors saw not just an animal, but a force of nature. This artistic resurrection is a vital cultural act. It keeps the giants from fading into abstract concepts. It gives the next generation a reference point for wonder, a starting point for their own imagination. In the careful lines of a paleo illustration, we are not just drawing a beast. We are trying to answer a question posed by a silent world. What did we lose when the thunder of their footsteps faded? The answer is no longer just in the bones, but in the art we create to give those bones a second life. Even with all we have uncovered, profound mysteries remain. The silent language of the giants is not a text we can simply translate, but a puzzle with pieces still missing. For instance, did every human culture, from the tribes of the Americas to the clans of Australia, develop the exact same symbolic vocabulary when confronted with a giant short-faced bear or a towering mammoth? Or did their unique environments and histories create distinct dialects of awe? We see powerful similarities in the archetypes, but the nuances of their stories might have been as varied as the landscapes themselves. This leads to an even deeper puzzle: the exact cognitive mechanism that transformed a physical threat into a spiritual concept. What was the precise mental leap that allowed a hunter, his heart pounding with fear, to look at a charging beast and later see a god? We understand the pressures that forged this link, but the spark of that first symbolic connection remains elusive, a ghost in the machine of our own mind. And this forces us to ask the most personal question of all: how much of your own inner world, your fears of the dark, your fascination with monsters, even your sense of wonder, is a direct inheritance from these ancient encounters? The answers are not yet clear, yet these unresolved questions are not a sign of failure. They are an open invitation. They remind us that the grand dialogue between humanity and the natural world is a story still being written. The lost language of the megafauna still whispers its secrets, waiting for the next generation of explorers, scientists, and storytellers to listen. The pursuit of these answers does more than satisfy curiosity. It keeps a vital connection alive. It ensures that the giants of the past, through our relentless quest to understand them, continue to shape the consciousness of the future. Our journey through the silent dialogue of giants reveals a truth far grander than simple prehistory. These colossal beasts were not passive features of the landscape, but active participants in the very forging of the human mind. They were our first and most formidable teachers. The initial shock of encountering a living mountain forged new neural pathways of awe and terror. The relentless challenge of the hunt sculpted our capacity for complex tools and social strategy. Their overwhelming presence provided the raw material for our first symbols, the archetypes of power, danger, and providence that became the bedrock of myth. Their ghostly footsteps echo in the art on our cave walls, the monsters in our stories, the deep-seated fears in our dreams, and our innate capacity for profound wonder. To understand this connection is to grasp a fundamental chapter in the story of our own consciousness. It grants us a deeper appreciation for the ancient forces that shaped us and a crucial, urgent perspective on our place in the world today. This exploration is more than an academic exercise. It is a call to listen carefully for the whispers of these ancient giants in the wind. It is a plea to protect the magnificent creatures that still walk and swim among us, the last living vessels of that primal awe. And it is an invitation to forever cherish the wild, humbling, and essential dialogue between humanity and the Earth's great beasts, a conversation that once defined us and can surely guide us forward.